The second big change are the change on the constitutional side. But this is the constitution of a federation. The Treaty of Lisbon abolishes the European Community, which we joined in 1973, and which is meant to the constitution, and which we're still a member of, and which still exists. It abolishes the community, which is the body that makes European Union laws at present. It's the community makes those on the Union. It then transfers all the powers and institutions of the community to the new Union. It's the second thing it does. The third thing it does, it gives full legal personality to the new Union, so that it can act as a legal actor on the international scene, just like any state. At present, the European Union doesn't have legal personality, the community does. It can't act as a legal person. It would obtain that under the Treaty of Lisbon, so that it could sign treaties with other states in all areas of its powers, so that it could make laws, as against the community making laws. The community is abolished, replaced by the Union, which then makes laws on the community. The name doesn't change. Judicial reality, the legal reality, changes profoundly. And then the final step, we've made real citizens for the first time of this new Union. We've given an additional citizenship, additional to our national citizenship. Our national citizenship doesn't disappear. We're still Irish citizens, but we've also made European Union citizens. And that's a classical federal constitution. In the United States of America and the Federal Republic of Germany, I don't know if you know, but everyone has two citizenships. An American is a citizen of America, but also a citizen of Massachusetts and California and New York, the states that originally set up the United States of America and transferred powers to the federal level from below. In the Federal Republic of Germany, you're a citizen not only of Germany, but you're also a citizen of Bavaria or Brandenburg or North Rhine-Westphalia or whatever other various lender or constituent states of the federal Germany. So it's quite common in a classic constitution, federal federation, to be like that. You have two citizenships, two constitutions at the federal level, at the local, regional or provincial level. And that's what the Treaty of Lisbon does. And yet the referendum commission doesn't tell people what's the meaning of being given an additional citizenship. We were British citizens for long enough, and lots of people objected to that. What is meant by being a real EU citizen for the first time? Because this is a real new entity being set up, with its own constitution, making laws, taking over the European community, signing treaties with other states in all spheres of its powers, having its own voice in the United Nations, separate from its member states, as long as the big states can decide what that voice should say, having its own diplomatic service, separate from its member states, and so on and so forth. These are all in the Treaty of Lisbon. What is meant by being given an additional citizenship? As a citizen, you can only be a citizen of a state. You can't be a citizen of a nation, you're a citizen of a state. And all states must have citizens. One implies the other. And as a citizen, you have rights and duties. The duties are to obey the law and be loyal to the authority of the state you're a citizen of. We still would have either citizenship, but we'd have rights and duties as Irish citizens and rights and duties as EU citizens. But if there's any clash between the two, it's the federal EU level would prevail because of the doctrine of the primacy of European Union law. And the Charter of Fundamental Rights sets out various rights of EU citizens. And the rights sound grand, with right to free speech, right to assemble, right to organise, right to life, right to property, etc., right to fair trial. We already have them under our own constitution. But as EU citizens, we have them under the EU constitution, which would open the possibility and the likelihood of the European Court of Justice being asked in specific cases in the years and decades to come to say, what are the rights of EU citizens to free speech? What's the right to fair trial for an EU citizen? There's a right to fair trial set out in the Charter. What does it mean for the 500 million EU citizens who are the population of the 27 member states, and their rights will be uniform across the board? Does a right to fair trial mean trial by jury and the presumption that you're innocent until proven guilty, as in Ireland or Britain? Or does it allow you to be detained for months on end without being brought before a court, as in Italy? What does the right to life include? Is there such a thing as a right to euthanasia? For European countries allow that at the moment? We don't know, but it's possible to imagine that the EU Court of Justice might decide there is such a right. Might. They may not, but they have the right to do that. Once you're an EU citizen, all rights issues will come within the purview of the European Court of Justice, the Supreme Court of the Union, for 500 million EU citizens to be decided in specific court cases in the years and decades to come if Lisbon goes through. Now that is a constitutional revolution. The European Union is given the constitutional form of a state. It takes over all the power of the community. It has real citizens. We're all made real citizens of that. We're still Irish citizens, but if there's any clash between the rights and duties of Irish citizens and the rights and duties of EU citizens, it's the EU level prevails. That's the basic principle. So that's a huge constitutional change. And Ireland and the other member states, instead of being sovereign member states, or at least substantially sovereign, they become like provincial or regional states in this new federal post-Lisbon European Union. rather like Massachusetts inside the United States of America. Massachusetts is a state, you're a citizen of Massachusetts, but it's a subordinate state within the USA, or like Bavaria within the Federal Republic of Germany. That's a constitutional revolution, both for the EU itself and for its member states. There's no money in the Treaty of Lisbon, there's no economic good in it, there's loss of power. Loss of power by smaller states to the big states, who find it much easier to run the show in their own interests. The treaty allows the EU to impose its own taxes for the first time. It has to be unanimous, but it's very likely they'll agree to impose taxes for the EU down the road. Once it's got all the extra powers, the Prime Ministers and Presidents who pushing this Treaty of Lisbon through would have no hesitation to have EU taxes down the road. It could be any tax in principle, separate from national state taxes, to raise revenue independently for the European Union. That's allowed for under Article 311. It makes it easier for the Court of Justice to order the harmonisation of indirect taxes. If the lack of such harmonisation, if there's a big difference in indirect taxes between Ireland, France, Germany, Portugal and so on, the Court of Justice can order their harmonisation if it judges that their lack of such harmonisation to be distortion of competition. Everything's subordinated in general to the idea of free competition, maximum competition between workers and capital and so on. There's no money in it. There's no jobs in it, as Declan Kennedy said. The main person who'd lose his job if the Treaty of Lisbon didn't go through would be Brian Common. But that almost certainly would happen. He couldn't survive that. What would happen if we vote no? If we vote no on Friday week, the 2nd of October, the Czechs and the Poles haven't yet ratified the treaty, and they will not ratify it. They will not ratify it if we don't ratify it. So the ratification process will cease. Within 7 or 8 months, you'll have a new government in Britain committed on its first day in office to withdraw Britain's ratification of the treaty and to hold a referendum on it in the United Kingdom and recommend a no vote to it, as long as it hasn't come into force for all 27 states first. So at present there's a kind of race on between trying to get the Lisbon Treaty ratified in the interest of the big states, because the Germans and French are particularly anxious to have it, and of course the Brussels Commission is also anxious to have it, before there's a change of government in Britain, when that government is committed, as long as it's not ratified for all 27 states first, because if it is ratified, the whole new constitutional works come into being. The European Union becomes a federal state, in effect. We're all made real citizens of it, and to withdraw from that and to undo it is much more difficult than not allowing it to come into being in the first place. So that's the real politics of the current situation, a kind of race on between a change of government in Britain and the ratification of the Lisbon Treaty. And if we allow it to be ratified and say yes, and if the Czechs and Poles then ratify it, it's likely to come into force on January the 1st next. And we're into a whole new historical ball game for Europe as a whole, with a real federation established, run on the most undemocratic lines, where 27 non-elected persons, the European commissioners, have the sole right of proposing all laws, because that's how it works. The commissioners, non-elected, appointed by the Council of Ministers, on the basis of suggestions, as I said, from member states after Lisbon, have the sole right of proposing laws, and then they will be made by the Council of Ministers on the basis of pure population size. So that the big states, instead of having just 4 times our weight as at present, would have 20 times in the case of Germany, 15 times in the case of the other big 3, Britain, France and Italy. So it's a bad treaty for Ireland and for Europe. People all over Europe want us to vote no. Certainly, the political elites, or the key political elites in France and Germany, want to get this treaty through. It gives them a lot more power. They'll run this show. The Brussels Commission want to get it through. Barroso was here yesterday in Limerick, urging people to vote yes. It's totally unlawful under European Union law for Barroso or any other Commission personnel to come here and participate actively in the Irish referendum campaign. The European Commission has no function in relation to the ratification of new treaties. New treaties, are entirely a matter for the member states. The final article of all these treaties says these treaties shall be ratified by each member state, signing them in accordance with their own constitutional procedures. The Brussels Commission is not a signatory to the treaty. It's got functions under past treaties. It's got functions in relation to existing treaties. But there's no function to try and get new treaties through, which would give it a lot more power. And yet that's what's happening.